Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Tuesday, November 18th. I'm Carrie Klein in for Elizabeth Arkalian. The Trump administration is taking its immigration enforcement campaign to the nation's trucking industry. And an industry spokesperson says reducing eligible drivers may not be so bad.
The trucking industry is in the deepest freight recession in history, even worse than the Great Financial Crisis. And so I think regardless of how we get rid of capacity, everyone in the industry is wanting it to happen because it has destroyed the economics of the industry.
We have that conversation right after these news headlines. A Democratic candidate for Congress in the Valley got a major endorsement yesterday. Senator Bernie Sanders endorsed Randy Villegas as he campaigns for House District 22. He's challenging Republican incumbent David Valadao. The seat is a battleground district and one that Democrats hope to flip under new House maps approved by voters this month. Villegas said in a statement he's focused on making life more affordable for families. Meanwhile, California's Republican Party and the U.S. Department of Justice are legally challenging Proposition 50. That's the redistricting measure voters overwhelmingly passed to temporarily create 5 new districts favoring Democrats. They argue it will disproportionately give Latinos a stronger voice. Chris McKaylee teaches California politics and law at McGeorge Law School.
So the fundamental allegation that's been made by Republicans and the U.S. Department of Justice is that these 5 redrawn districts were done to favor one minority group, Latino voters. And it doesn't appear, based upon an analysis by an independent group, that that is what the outcome ultimately created.
The Public Policy Institute of California found that Latinos would not gain more representation under the Prop 50 congressional map. The case is currently in a federal district court. It could be elevated to the U.S. Supreme Court if rulings are appealed. Faculty in the State Center Community College District announced a unanimous so-called vote of no confidence against Chancellor Carol Goldsmith. KVPR's Samantha Rangel has this report.
The State Center Federation of Teachers says Chancellor Carol Goldsmith's leadership has created what they call a, quote, toxic autocratic culture. Keith Ford is the faculty union president.
Under Goldsmith's leadership, the district's legal expenses have exploded. A team of bullies has enacted a culture of retaliation and fear, ignoring faculty expertise and silencing college voices.
The union cited a recent spike in lawsuits and alleged First Amendment violations for pushing for Chancellor Goldsmith's ouster. Goldsmith announced her retirement last week, hours before the union took the vote. She plans to serve until September. But the union is pushing for her to step down even sooner. Chancellor Goldsmith said in a statement that the faculty vote doesn't reflect the district's trajectory under her leadership. She said the district has been stable under her leadership and has seen record enrollment levels and strong finances. With KVPR News, I'm Samantha Rangel.
The number of new international students enrolling at U.S. colleges is down 17% from last year. Our newsroom partner EdSource reports international students make up about 7% of 4-year college enrollees in California. In the UC system, international students are charged more than 3 times the tuition paid by students from California. Cahuilla Health in Visalia announced its new chief executive officer. Mark Mertz will step in as the next CEO in December following the retirement of Gary Herbst. Mertz joined Cahuilla Health in 2018 as chief strategy officer. Cahuilla Health is the largest hospital in Tulare County.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from Fresno Mazda, part of the Prieto Automotive family, leading the industry in the IIHS 2025 Top Safety Pick Awards, helping move Mazda closer to the goal of eliminating traffic fatalities. More information and the Mazda digital showroom available at myfresnomazda.com.
And now to our main story. America's trucking industry is the backbone of our supply chain. Drivers travel thousands of miles to keep food and electronics moving across the country. But the industry is now one of the latest targets of President Trump's immigration crackdown. In recent months, the administration has highlighted deadly trucking accidents to make a case for stripping trucking licenses from some immigrants and making licenses harder to obtain. Earlier this month, a federal audit led California to revoke 17,000 commercial driver's licenses, or CDLs. The audit found inconsistencies with license expiration dates and the time an immigrant was allowed to stay in the country. And last week, a federal court blocked a plan by the Federal Transportation Department that would have added even more strict rules for immigrant drivers. So what does it do to the industry when you try to limit the number of truckers? Craig Fuller is the CEO of FreightWaves. That's an industry website providing data on trucking and logistics. He's also a trucking industry veteran and recently joined KVPR's Sarith Hawk for a conversation about the crossroads the trucking industry finds itself in right now. Fuller starts with a surprising insight that the trucking industry is saturated with drivers.
COVID was actually a really strong time in the economy. So for freight, everybody was at home. They were buying a lot of products. The government was funding a lot of stimulus. And what we saw was the trucking industry responded to that by adding a lot of new trucks and a lot of new truck drivers into the industry's payroll. And unfortunately, we overcorrected as an industry. We added way too many trucks. If you go back and sort of take 2020 to where we're at today, there is 19% more trucks on the road today than there was at the start of COVID. That's an astounding amount of capacity that's been added into the industry. And what we have done is we have eliminated the barriers to entry, and this has significantly impacted everyone in the industry, which is one of the reasons I think most of the industry generally is positive towards developments that get rid of what they consider excess capacity.
Many truckers in California are from the Sikh community, and the director of one coalition called United Sikhs put out a statement this week saying that this will hurt the livelihoods of Sikh truckers. That coalition is actually pushing to reinstate these licenses. Do you think the trucking community would rally around this group?
Probably not, to be frank. I think the industry generally wants to get rid of excess capacity. I mean, this is one of the biggest and deepest downturns. It's frankly harder than the great financial crisis. And I think what the industry is looking for is a purge of a lot of excess capacity. And so I think regardless of, what community or ethnicity or group they come from, I think generally across the trucking market, they'll take any reductions from any source, regardless of how it comes about.
Okay, so I want to get back to how we got here. The Trump administration, specifically the Transportation Department, has been pushing hard to regulate who is employed as a trucker, and this really jumped into the spotlight after several deadly crashes involving truckers who were immigrants but who had validly issued licenses. The administration zeroed in on California. So from your reading, what has this back and forth between the state and the federal government been like, and has it disrupted the industry?
Well, I think disruption depends on what you mean by disruptions. It certainly has brought a lot of attention to the issues of the industry. There are over 5,000 fatal accidents a year which involve a heavy-duty truck. And if you take the Bureau of Labor and Statistics study, as many as 20% of the total number of truck drivers are foreign-born. And so statistically, if you think about that, we're going to have at least 1,000 fatal accidents which are involving foreign-born immigrants that are involved in heavy-duty trucks. But when you have an accident like the one we had in Ontario, California not too long ago that was filmed where the driver was an immigrant and for whatever reason did not stop his brakes, and it was a pretty horrific accident. When you see things like that, and it just turns out that it is an immigrant, it gives the administration in some ways some air cover to execute their strategy of cracking down on immigration. And so I think the administration has found a relatively safe place to sell the story that there is a population of truck drivers that are unsafe. And foreigners happen to be caught up in that because of the large foreign population that is in the trucking industry.
And since you know really the ins and outs of this I wanted to ask, what exactly do you need other than a valid CDL to be a trucker?
Well, this is really a totally different issue, but highly related. So there's been this narrative over the last couple of decades about this perpetual driver shortage. And so the industry was very supportive of lowering the barriers to entry, which also lowered the education and qualification requirements of would-be truck drivers. And one of the most damaging things that they did is this concept of called the entry-level driver training program. The rule came out in 2021, but was actually put into place in 2022, which allowed companies to self-certify that they had done the training for the truck driver. And there were churches that were registered, there were employers that were registered. Basically, the number of truck driving schools jumped from 2,000 to 36,000 registered entities that now can determine that you have met the qualifications and become a truck driver, you have demonstrated proficiency, and you can now go and get your CDL test. The challenge is that even though the Department of Transportation said that there was an audit process to verify that you had done what you said you had done, and you had properly trained and vetted this driver's qualifications, they never actually did those investigations and audits and went out and assessed whether these companies had actually done the job that they were supposed to have done. And that's the problem, is that because of this erosion of the barriers to entry, the industry is far less safe than what it once was. And this is all sort of packaged up as this other sets of problems that the industry is trying to contend with.
I understand that the language issued has been a sticking point for the Trump administration. They want to enforce rules where truckers are proficient in English. One could see the reasons that this is definitely important, but is this a realistic goal?
Well, look, that rule has been around since the 1930s, but largely ignored because it didn't seem to be a priority, particularly when you felt like there was a truck driver shortage. That felt like a more pressing concern than worrying about whether someone had English proficiency. But I think the English proficiency rule, which is on the books, gives the administration a legal framework to actually go out and enforce their immigration expectations and rules. You know, one of the challenges of watching this as an observer of the industry is that trucking is a job that offers an enormous amount of upward mobility for people of color. I had dinner with a person from the Federal Reserve about 2 years ago when we were talking about the homeless crisis. And one of the things that the Fed had discovered is that trucking in some ways is a refuge from some of the homelessness that exists in America, particularly in people of color. And what they had determined was that because the people can live in their trucks, it offers a refuge from the streets. And so with upward mobility, with income and a place to live. And because we've had this just massive glut of people coming into the industry, it has made it so that those upward mobility opportunities are not as available for anyone, and particularly people of color.
And lastly, Craig, I wanted to get sort of your view, your outlook on what all of this is going to do for the trucking industry now that we're going to see these licenses being taken away. What are you seeing as far as an outlook for the future of the trucking industry?
Well, the trucking industry is in the deepest freight recession in history, even worse than the great financial crisis. I'm speaking on behalf of the industry, but this is my observation. Regardless of how we get rid of capacity, everyone in the industry is wanting it to happen because it has destroyed the economics of the industry. And so I think as the administration cracks down on immigration and puts other new standards in terms of driver qualifications, regardless of ethnicity and whether they're a foreigner or not, those things will make it more challenging to bring drivers into the market. And that should improve the safety record of the industry, but also improve the economics for the trucking industry.
That was Sarith Hawk speaking with Craig Fuller. He's the founder and CEO of Freight Waves, a price reporting agency providing data on trucking and logistics. And that's today's show. Today's episode was produced by me, Carrie Klein, Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado, and KVPR, with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Carrie Klein. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
Sources and methods, the crown jewels of the intelligence community. Shorthand for how do we know what's real? Who told us? If you have those answers, you're on the inside, and NPR wants to bring you there. From the Pentagon to the State Department to spy agencies, listen to understand what's really happening and what it means for you. Sources and Methods, the new national security podcast from NPR.